So I think a lot of people, including myself, make a lot of mistakes. I make a ton of mistakes all of the time, and I have to recalibrate where people are, what I'm about and what I'm thinking of. And I think about like one of the biggest mistakes that I have made, massive mistake, is thinking that other people cared. And you know, it's always this sort of realization you come into something where you're like, wait a minute, I'm the only one that's actually caring about this thing. This is the only thing that's actually, this is important, but nobody else sees it, nobody else cares. And so you have to take this weird step back where you have to sort of think about like, hey, you know, um, I'm okay with doing this for myself, and it doesn't depend on anybody. That's like a crazy hard thing to think about, where, particularly when you start doing something that matters, is that when you start, like, nobody will care at all. And in fact, you might go through your entire life of doing things and nobody's going to care at all. And you just have to be kind of happy with that. And for me, as somebody, I've always wanted people to like me. That's like deeply, deeply built into me. Um, and you have to take this step back. It's funny. I could talk about this right now, publicly on like a podcast, and I know nobody's going to listen to it except for a small group of people, and those small group of people are going to be probably, avid fans, and I do appreciate you, but everybody else that I'm worried about, all of the people that, I think, oh my gosh, what if so and so listens to this, or what if there's, I don't know. Maybe I lose my job or whatever, right? Like all of that kind of stuff. And the truth is nobody cares. Um, and the only time that they're going to care is when it makes them, look bad upon themselves. Um, you know, or somebody is struggling and they need something, right? And that's kind of like, if you start thinking about that, of all of the moments where people have reached out to you in various different ways, is kind of what happens. It's not necessarily that, people are, it's often just the fact of like, hey, wait a minute, nobody cares. How do I deal with this? How do I process this? How do I become happy when I need to be standalone, detached, happy by myself? And that doesn't depend on anybody else. That doesn't depend, and then, none of the sort of success that I have is attached to anybody. And I am, regardless of what happens, you kind of have to be like this, a bit of a hermit, where, in the sense of like a social hermit, where you're like totally comfortable being by yourself, where, nobody cares about that particular thing. And then you have to think about, how do I deal with this? Um, and then, you know, if by chance, and it's not going to happen, um, if by chance people do understand, they do care about what you're doing, then that's lovely, right? Sorry, I'm just doing some exercises. But that's why I think, it's kind of fun. It's very freeing when you think about how little people actually care about things and they care about themselves, because you can do so much. Um, and you just be yourself a lot more, rather than waiting for that approval, waiting for, recognition, any of those kind of things. That's the interesting thing. That's where, one of the mistakes that I constantly make is look for approval, or look for, before I do something, I almost always want to feel like, hey, I should get that checkbox to say that I'm okay to do this thing. The reality is that nobody's even going to pay attention to this thing. And then you have to take this step back and say, wait a minute, if nobody's paying attention to this thing, which is a hard lesson to learn, why am I even bother asking at the beginning? um, I'm becoming a much more of an avid fan of this sort of, ask for forgiveness and ask for permission thing, um, where you just figure it out. You become, very much more independent. And as you go about of doing things and you start interacting with the world, I think you got to learn that. I think that's a really big lesson that is a very important part of life. It's just like, wait a minute. This is very freeing. And I just want, that's a big mistake. And my default, I'm training myself to be my default with much of everything that I do is nobody's going to care about this thing. So how do I process that? How do I feel about this? That I'm perfectly happy, regardless of what is going on. And I think thinking that in your head and coming down to you know, this, this is not going to be a thing. What do I do? How am I going to process this? And how am I going to move forward? That's good. And that's where I'm like, you sort of figure out your thing. You become very independent, um, and quit asking for other people for their permission to do your thing because it's not going to happen, right? And frankly, it's just so far removed. And it's such a, when I say this, I think a lot of people are going to be like, oh my gosh, what's he? He's just kind of like a grumpy old man, right? But no, it's coming down to the just realization after doing things where I thought people would care, it'd be something that was important, all those kind of things where you're just like, no, wait a minute. Everybody is very much doing their own thing until it benefits or affects them in some sort of real direct way. And then something will happen. So that's where you just have to be okay and walk your walk and say, hey, I'm good enough with this, and just keep doing my thing and and keep being yourself, keep being wonderfully awesome and kooky, and know that yeah, it ain't gonna work out the way that you thought it was gonna work out, right? Where we all make these sort of mistakes where we sort of recalibrate or we calibrate in the wrong way. And coming to terms with that, I think is a hard lesson, but it's a very, very important lesson for all of us. All right, take care. Have a wonderful day.